Hey everyone, it's Peter Kerr from Daydream Nation, and today I've got Reed Little back to the channel. How are you, Reed?
I'm doing great today, Peter. I am so looking forward to this. I love talking Sabbath. Thank you for inviting me.
Not a problem. Today we are going to talk about Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, which was the fifth album from Black Sabbath released in 1973. We are going to cover each song, what we like, what we don't like. And along the way, we are going to ask the question, is this the most proggiest Sabbath album of all? So, Reed, my first question to you is, what was your first impression when you heard Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, the actual first listen of this album? What was your impression?
So my my very first impression was that I thought it sounded very weird. It's a very eclectic album. Now, again, my point of entry with Black Sabbath was Dio. So it was actually Mob Rules. Well, the first album I ever heard was Paranoid, but I was a kid and I didn't really pay attention. So the first album that I ever listened to intentionally and paid attention to what I was listening to was Mob Rules, and then Heaven and Hell, and then I kind of worked my way backwards. And when I got to Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, I thought, wow, this album's all over the map and it sounds weird. You know, it's got so much keyboards, it's got so much synthesizer. It's such a different, even for Sabbath, it's such a different album. And I just didn't know what to think about it. But there was a time when I was going for really long walks as a form of exercise. And I started listening to old albums that I hadn't listened to in a while. And Sabbath Bloody Sabbath became one of my favorite albums to walk to. And over a period of weeks, it became pretty much my favorite Ozzy album. And yeah, I'll just leave it at that because I actually prefer it to any of Ozzy's actual solo albums as well. I think it's a wonderful album, but it's very strange and it's really an outlier in the Sabbath catalog.
Yes, yes. Well, for me, my very first Sabbath album that I purchased was Live Evil, Dio. So
Yeah.
much like yourself, I'm of a similar age. I was very much in the Dio wheelhouse, Heaven and Hell, Mob Rules. And then I got Technical Ecstasy, which is an outlier. And then I listened to this album and I gravitated instantly to the first song, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, because it's got this monstrous doomy riff, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. I like the variety, the use of the keyboards, different time signature changes, melodies. I found it quite inventive, but it was completely different and outside the wheelhouse of what I had been accustomed to listening to Dio, Black Sabbath, and the Aussie Sabbath of Technical Ecstasy. So, and my journey continued. So it was very early on the piece that I listened to this album in the Sabbath canon. So,
Right.
all right. So, Reed, why don't we get stuck into it and we'll just do a bit of a song by song. Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, the opening track. Tell us about that. What are your thoughts on this one?
So clearly a Black Sabbath classic. Now, many people will even list it, even if they don't particularly like this album. And it's rare, even among our circles, it's rare to find somebody who thinks this is their favorite Sabbath album. People are much more likely to say Master of Reality or Vol 4 as one of their favorites. But for me, this song would have fit in perfectly on either Master of Reality or Vol 4. And I'm going to have to bring in bits of theme on whether this is Sabbath's most proggy album kind of as we go. Because I think this track has all of the arguments for or against that are contained in this track. One, it is recognizably Sabbath. It opens up with that Tony riff. It's basically unsupported. It's guitar. You're just hearing guitar. And then you go into drums, bass, vocal on top of guitar. And it's very stereotypical of Sabbath. It could have been on Paranoid at that point. And then at 43 seconds into the song, it changes and becomes a different song. When he gets to the Nobody Will Ever Let You Know part, and he's got an acoustic guitar playing in the background, and it's not, I don't think that it's a different time signature. It's a completely different feel to the drumming, but I'm pretty sure it's the same beat. I was just kind of tapping along with it while I was listening to it, and I think it's the same. Although Bill is playing, Bill's a very, I don't even know what the word is, disorganized player, right? He's not a just keep time kind of player.
He's a percussionist.
He's all over the place with his, and I think Bill just kills it on this album. It's my favorite Bill Ward performances are on this album.
Yeah.
But I think it's all the same time signature. But my point here is, so you're thinking, all right, it's got a completely different song arrangement right here, 43 seconds in. But the song might as well be changes off of Volume 4. So it's still recognizably Sabbath. It's something that they've already done, but it's Frankensteined together in a way that they haven't done previously. So there's an argument both for and against it being proggy, right? Yeah, it's a much more complicated arrangement, but he's arranging things that they've already done. He's just putting the puzzle together differently than he used to. And what I really hear on this song is simply Tony Iommi becoming a better songwriter. This is it's 3 years. Black Sabbath has been active for 3 years, and they've put out 5 albums. They're learning as they go, and he's simply getting better at what he does.
Yeah. When you say Frankenstein, because Frankenstein to me is like assembled and it's a little bit disjointed. Right. Do you think this flows to your liking? When I heard the word Frankenstein, I got a little bit alarmed. Does this not flow to you?
It does, and I'm one of those people that thinks this is a Sabbath classic, just a stone cold classic. But they don't conceptually go together. If you were just to say, hey, it's Doom Sabbath up front, and then it's slow melodic Sabbath at 43 seconds, and there's no transition. It's just going bang, 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 and then suddenly it's slow and melodic. And does it work? Yes. And one of the reasons it works is because no one else was really doing that, right? That was Sabbath being 2 different kinds of Sabbath in the same song. Yeah. But if you describe it, it doesn't sound like it would go together.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. Well, I think this has got one of Tony Iommi's most doomiest riffs. And that was the thing that kind of frustrated me when I saw Sabbath on the last 2 tours that they did Australia, that Ozzy would do this as part of a melody. And I think viewers to this station know what our views are on melodies. We're not a big fan of it. So I felt a bit gypped. I wanted more because it's one of my favorite Sabbath songs. Right. And the big hook for me on this song is when it comes into 3 minutes and 16 seconds. It goes into the biggest, sludgiest, most evil riff that you'll hear in rock music. So where the lyrics go, where can you run to? What more can you do? No more tomorrow. Life is killing you. Ozzy's actually, by the way, Ozzy's singing on this album is absolutely stone cold fantastic. And when he's singing, and it's got that really sludgy it's just hairs on the back of your neck just stand up on end. I've actually read a lot of social media posts where people say this is where death metal, black metal started. If you want to see the nucleus or the embryo, the seed, 3 minutes and 16 seconds into this song, that's where it all began. But you make an interesting point in regards to, it starts off with the classic Ozzy, the classic Iommi riff, and then it oscillates between that and this little acoustic bit where it's got a little bit of a lilting country feel. There's this little sort of guitar lick that sounds slightly old country, bit of an uplift. I want to do a shout out about the lyrics. I always thought Geezer Butler is the most underrated lyricist in metal or rock. I've called him the Dylan of metal. And it's about the Sabbath experience, the ups and downs, the good and the bad. They were getting quite fatigued, and it's all in this song, Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. Lyrics do matter, and I think in Sabbath world, they are just as important as the music because they match, especially Geezer's lyrics.
Well, I think this album has Geezer's, doggone it, pardon me. I think this album has Geezer's best lyrics. This is not the song that I think has his best lyrics. I think two other songs on the album take that honor, but yes, I think his lyrics on this album are amazing.
Yeah. It's probably one of my favorite songs on the album, or one of my favorite Sabbath songs. And if I had to hang my hat on a high point, it's that 3 minutes and 16 seconds where he goes into this sludgely doomy riff. I think maybe that, Zero the Hero may have been a close contender for the most doomiest, sludgiest riff, and that was in Gillan in 1983. So if I was going to say what is the most doomiest evil riff of Sabbath of all time, it's either this song or Zero the Hero. But it's a fine opening track.
Can I expound on that point a little bit? Because I think there's so much to unpack in this song in particular. I mean, we'll go through the other songs too, but especially that part when I talk about Frankensteining the parts. So you've got three main motifs. You've got the opening riff with lyric. You've got the I would say more folky than country, but you know what? Everyone who's listening, if you've heard the song, you'll know what we're talking about. And then the part at the end that you're talking about, the doomy, sludgy part. But to me, the doomy, sludgy part is very reminiscent of War Pigs. So it's still a very Black Sabbath song. So you've got three Black Sabbath songs that they have sliced into pieces and shuffled like a deck of cards. So you get three completely different feels of song. Now that's compositionally, that is very advanced. It's more than they went into on previous albums, although each album got a little bit, better with the compositions. But then when you get to the solo, I want to talk about Tony's solo for a second, because his solo is so atypical of anything else Tony Iommi plays, not just on this album, but on any of the previous four albums. It's minimalistic. He's got the riff going at the same volume, and then he's got these two solos going. He's clearly playing it twice. He's multi-tracking it in a close harmony. And there's very few notes. He's not trilling it. He's not burning up and down the fretboard. It's just dan-an-it, dan-an-it. And that is not how Tony normally solos. So that is a really weird feeling in the middle of this song. So I said, there you go. There are four big experimental things in this first track.
Yeah, absolutely. The production on this album is fine. On this song, you can actually hear the squeak of the strings.
Yes.
And it adds to the organic flavor of it. It's the rawness. I think it's a great song. Great opening track. All right, let's move it along. Let's talk about a national acrobat. This is a little bit of a change of pace. What do you think of this song?
Right. So, and with one exception, which probably will not surprise people when we get to it, and you say, I love every song on this album, but this is one of the two songs that I think are in contention for Geezer's best lyrics ever. A national acrobat. Who else in heavy metal ever wrote a song about the unappreciated sperm and its trial that it goes through attempting to fertilize the egg, and the plucky little guy that gets through and is finally born into a person, that must be some kind of superhuman national acrobat. I mean, what a concept, right? And it should come as no surprise that these guys were doing tons of drugs. Even for a band known for taking a lot of drugs, they were doing a lot of drugs. But we get a couple of new things again. We get Ozzy multi-tracking his vocals. Now, that's not something that's typical of the Sabbath sound to this point. So he's singing a harmony to himself, actually providing backup singers. That's new. They hadn't done that on previous tracks. And let's see here. What else did I want to say about this one? When we get to the solo this time, Tony is doing so many weird things with the solos. The solo on this song is two completely separate solos. So he's playing the riff, and then he clearly records two completely different takes of the solo. And rather than choosing which one to use, he plays them both at the same time. And it provides this weird dissonant, sometimes it works together harmonically, sometimes it doesn't, it really clashes. And then when you get to the end, because he actually plays a very similar feel, they're very close, it sounds almost like harmony. But it's not, it's two completely different solos played on top of each other. Something he's going to do again later in the album, but, and again, as far as I remember, and I did not listen to every minute of the first 4 albums to make sure that this is correct. Let me just get that out of the way, in case I'm wrong. But I don't think he'd ever done anything close to that. And that was weird for 1973. That's not something that bands were doing.
Yeah. I think this song starts off very stoner rock. It's kind of like a little bit held back. The lyrics, I love it. Life, death, conception, reincarnation, what the unborn child thinks. I think it's a great lyric. Ozzy's vocals are very expressive. I think Ozzy's vocals between this and Sabotage, I think that was at his vocal pinnacle. I love the Iommi wah-wah pedal. It gets that little bit of wah-wah.
Right.
Bill Ward's drumming. He's drumming between the cracks. He's doing these little offbeats. It's really interesting. And it adds to the flavor. It just drives it along. But he's not doing the conventional 1, 2, 3, 4. He's going in between the beats. Kind of interweaves in. And then I love the ending where it just does this whacked out change of time signature. And the outro gets faster and faster. This is a proggy song. At the end of the day, don't you think, Reed? This is in the category of prog.
I want to get it right out front that I am not a prog expert to anybody listening to this. So I'm not, I like a lot of Yes. I like some King Crimson. I like some Genesis, but I'm not a deep prog fan. But to me, I think that there are still more core Sabbath elements than there are prog elements in this song. But because they had done the speedy intro or the speedy exit on previous songs. They had done Geezer Butler's bass on this sounds like the way he was playing on Master of Reality. So they're still bringing so many of their elements. And again, said it's only 3 years, people. They've only been a band for 4 years, and they've only been putting out albums and touring for 3 years. So
talk about it. Evolution. Wow.
Yeah. But it is evolution and not revolution. They didn't become different people. They didn't become Yes in 3 years. They are still Sabbath, but they are experimenting. And if you were going to say, does it have proggy elements? Yes, absolutely it does. Yep. But I think, to me, it's still much more Sabbathy than it is proggy.
Okay, alrighty. So the next track is, there's always an Iommi palette cleanser on a lot of the albums, like a little bit of an acoustic piece called Fluff. Have you got any comments on that other than it's a palette cleanser?
No, don't. It shows Iommi's versatility. I said, Tony Iommi is absolutely one of my top guitar heroes. I adore the way Tony Iommi plays. And growing up in the 1980s, he was so out of favor. I remember years where he would win Worst Guitarist in Hit Parader magazine because Tony is not a shredder. Now, people say that as if he doesn't play fast. Tony plays fast. You know, try and play some of those licks. His fingers are flying, especially for a man that's missing the last digit on two of his fingers. But he doesn't do, he doesn't play legato. He doesn't do the three-note string skipping Eddie Van Halen thing. And people are like, he's old news. But man, the guy could play, and he was versatile. So he could throw in those big doomy riffs and then stuff like this. But again, this is definitely not a prog song. And it's so similar to Changes. I bet that they had not intended it to be an instrumental piece. I bet it was just something he composed, and they were like, "Yeah, we don't have anything." Geezer and Ozzy were like, "Yeah, we don't have anything to go with that. We'll just leave it as an instrumental."
Yep, I've got nothing much more to add to that. I think you perfectly articulated that, Reed. Sabra Kadabra.
Okay, and now this is usually people's other pick for best song on this album.
Really?
Okay.
Yeah.
This is one. I think it's Lars Ulrich is famous for saying Sabra Kadabra is his favorite song from Black Sabbath.
I'm surprised. I like it a lot, but I'm just surprised.
It's very upbeat. It's very up tempo. It's a love song. When was the last time Black Sabbath recorded a love song?
A decadent love song.
If you consider NIB to be a love song, maybe that was their last love song, or something off of the first album anyway, like Evil Woman. But I love the riff on the song. It's a great song. It swings. There's so much swing to it. And again, and this is why I said at the start, it's such a weird album. Because a National Acrobat doesn't sound anything like Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. And then you get Fluff, which is a pastoral instrumental. And then you get Sabra Kadabra, which kind of sounds a little bit like National Acrobat, but it's really a very different song. So this album is all over the place. Of course, famously, it has Rick Wakeman playing Mellotron. But I'll tell you, this song, to me, it's a jam band song. This is like if you gave the Grateful Dead cocaine instead of acid, this is the song that they would put out. They're just raving it up. They're having a good time. The whole end of the song is just an extended jam. Rick Wakeman's playing the piano. They're just going to town. Actually, no, it may not have been Wakeman playing the piano. I'd have to look at
No, it is Rick Wakeman on piano.
Yeah. But I think it's a jam band song. And again, very unusual for Black Sabbath.
Yeah. I love the interplay. They're really going for it. It's kind of got a little bit of a loose feel to it, a bit jazzy. Yeah, I've got nothing much more to add. It's just got that wonderful interplay of instruments. The lyric is just wrapped around about this little lady, feels so fine. It's sort of hedonistic. It's celebratory. And all right. Killing Yourself to Live. A little bit of a autobiography angle to this one.
Yeah, and apparently Geezer, the story is that Geezer was actually in the hospital when he wrote these lyrics, being treated for his alcohol abuse. And
I think it was Bill Ward. I read stories it was Bill Ward.
Oh, was it? Well, I mean, Bill didn't write the lyrics.
Yeah, but the story was about Bill, because Bill's been battling the bottle, and it was about him.
Certainly, they all deserved it. They were doing everything they could to kill themselves. It's remarkable they lived in 1974, let alone 2023.
Yeah.
Can't believe all those guys are still alive. But this is the song, even more so than Sabra Kadabra, which has Mellotron and piano. This is the song where you get really prominent synthesizer. Now, in 1973, a synthesizer was literally not a small thing. and a Moog synthesizer is a very large piece of equipment. So they weren't something that you just carried around in the trunk of your car and noodled around with. It was an investment in time and money in space. And all of these guys had acquired synthesizers and were dicking around with them and decided to put synthesizers on this album. And I think it's that additional, one of the things that you can absolutely point to as a proggy element on this album is that it has the extra instrumentation. And it doesn't, there was, again, as a kid from the 80s, in the 80s, if you were into metal, you did not like synthesizers. There's that famous, you can find it on YouTube, the famous quote from Bruce Dickinson, "You can't make metal with synthesizers." Although Bruce now is like, oh, I've got to eat those words. I wish I had never said that. But in 1973, synthesizers were prog band instruments. That's who was playing synthesizers. That was Emerson, Lake and Palmer. That wasn't Black Sabbath. So very unusual to have such prominent synthesizers. And it's the guys in Sabbath playing the synthesizers.
Well, it just shows that they've got musical. It just shows that they've got musical curiosity because they wanted to expand their sound.
That's right.
And the use of synthesizers or expanding the sound. Maybe you could go back to Volume 4, like the use of the mellotron in that album with changes.
Right.
Further expanded in this album, Sabotage, Technical Ecstasy. That goes back even, a lot of piano.
I often say this particular song is a trial run for, I think, the Writ on Sabotage. It sounds so much like a Sabotage track.
Yeah.
And this is the second song on the album where we get Iommi playing two completely different solos, both of which are left in the song. And that is so weird. And I can't believe it works as well as it does.
I get the feel that Ozzy's really hitting the notes hard on this song. There's a lot of feeling, and maybe because the lyrics are hitting it home to him.
Right.
Let's face it, the whole band, as you alluded to, were probably going through issues regarding substance abuse. So I think that this is a vocal line that demonstrates full commitment. He's just really hitting it hard. Everything actually hits it hard. It's a bit of a three-parter. So it does, different time signatures, different melodies, does play into this topic of elements of prog, whether it's fully blown prog or not.
Right.
But there's definitely elements of prog. I love the power chords. Sometimes, Iommi doesn't need to do these little fast runs. He just has to do that down-tuned power chord, and that's just more powerful than some of the riffs. Yeah, I don't think I've got much more to say. I think this is probably one of the best songs on the album, in my opinion. It's up there with Sabbath Bloody Sabbath.
Yeah, and it's another one though for all of that, for all of the experimentation, for all of the extra bits. The guitar riff would fit perfectly on Master of Reality. So again, I'm going to stick with my thesis that yes, it's very experimental Sabbath, but it's still Sabbath. Sometimes people talk about this album like it came down from space, and it's like they're completely different people. And I'm like, no, it's really not. It's the next step forward for this band.
Yes.
It's clearly the same band.
Absolutely. And a shout out to Bill Ward with the little drum fills between the verses.
So, Bill.
Yeah, he's just doing all these little,
killing it.
He's just doing all these little fills, but they're not conventional. It's not where you would expect. They're kind of between the notes, and there's syncopated rhythms. It's just really, really interesting playing, but it drives it along. Can I talk about how there's a slightly bluesy vocal lick, or should we just save that for another show?
No, you can if you want. I mean, it's still Ozzy, and Ozzy's the bluesiest guy. I know people are going to say, Tony, you're wrong, but Ozzy is the bluesiest guy in the band.
Yeah, well, I got absolutely hammered by certain folk on a show I did with the Contrarians about how I said that Ozzy's vocal lines are kind of influenced by the blues or index the blues. And
Right.
I think I hear a lot in this album where he is doing like a vocal line, which is kind of like at right angles with the melody line, and it's kind of bluesy. So this is one that comes to mind. And I could imagine this song. I could imagine an old-time blues person like a Muddy Waters, for example, could sing something like this, slow it down, put that vocal riff easily.
Well, at least the subject matter is arguably the blues. He's singing, living or killing yourself to live is a good blues subject. And I always say, if you're going to have the blues has to be about the blues. So at least this song, the subject matter is blues subject matter. So I'll give you that.
Yeah. But I'm talking about the vocal lines here, folks. I'm not
Sure.
talking the music to me is very metal. There's prog influences, but it's the vocal line to me. I can hear that there's definitely some bluesy influences. And again, it's one of Ozzy's most expressional type of vocal lines. I think his singing is just fine on this album. All right. Let's go to the next track. Who Are You?
Right. So this should come as no surprise to anybody who's paid attention to me ranting about Ozzy's compositional skills or lack thereof before. But this is my least favorite song on this album. It is an Ozzy composition, and I apologize to Ozzy. I have said many times that he only ever composed one song for Sabbath. He composed two. This one and Am I Going Insane? They're both terrible.
Come on.
But this song has, I think, the least guitar of any song Sabbath ever recorded, unless you consider FX to be an actual track off of Vol 4. I mean, it's, which is just a coked out Tony making some noise in the studio. There's almost no guitar in this. There's one little guitar break. And other than that, it's synth noodling. And again, this is just guys doing a lot of drugs, noodling around on their new equipment, and he comes up with this arrangement. And it's okay. I like it, but I actually like it better than Am I Going Insane Radio.
Yeah,
I do.
A lot of people put crap on that. Am I Going Insane? I like that. And in the context of that whole album, Sabotage, which I've done on another show with Peter Jones, check it out.
Right.
It fits in perfectly because they were just hit with writs. They were at their lowest ebb mentally, and a lot of the anger came out in that album. But getting back to this one, do you like the Morricone type of guitar? There's got a little bit of a spaghetti western feel towards the end of it. When the guitars come in, it reminds me of the cavalry coming out, or like one of those spaghetti westerns. I don't know. Am I?
So two different things there. One, I actually do. I like the Ennio Morricone style music, and I think it fits surprisingly well into a heavy metal genre. You can fit that into a metal framework. I don't know what it is musically about that. I know some about music theory, but my knowledge is not advanced enough to analyze those two things and figure out why they work.
And Metallica have done that a few times, haven't they?
Yeah, or you've got Iron Maiden with Writing on the Wall from Senjutsu.
Yep.
So, I think that fits. But that having been said, I don't know that I hear spaghetti western in this, Peter. But I am going to re-listen to it and see if I hear that.
Yeah, I think so. There's a little bit of it's what I hear anyway. Just for the purposes, the Moog or the Moog synthesizer is actually Tony playing, not Rick Wakeman. So,
okay.
And this goes back to the story where all the band bought synths. So it's actually Tony
right.
in this one.
They actually, I think all three of them, Ozzy, Geezer, and Tony, all have keyboard credits on this song.
Yeah. All right. Looking for today.
All right, so here's an interesting thing. On my copy of this album, even though the official track listing says that Looking for Today is next and the album ends with Spiral Architect, my CD has Spiral Architect next and Looking for Today is the last song. So that is the track listing that I have always listened to, is with Looking for Today being the last track. So I just wanted to throw that out there because it actually makes a difference how you sequence the album, because they're very different songs and it leaves you with a different feeling. And I actually prefer Looking for Today as the final track versus Spiral Architect. And we'll talk about that when we get to Spiral Architect. But having said that, it's just so weird. For a long time, I thought Spiral Architect was Looking for Today because of the way the track listing was. And I was trying to figure out how the lyrics fit with that. And, clearly they don't because it was the wrong song. But I would say, again, it's a very typical Volume 4 song with some added bits. But those are important bits, like the flute. And I love the addition of the flute on this song.
Prog.
And I think, well, yeah, because remember, Tony Iommi was in Jethro Tull for 15 minutes. He's even in Pete Townshend's Rock and Roll Circus, John Lennon's who's Rock and Roll Circus? The Rolling Stones Rock and Roll Circus?
Yeah, Rolling
Rolling
Stones, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, but you can see Tony Iommi playing with Jethro Tull in that movie.
Yes.
So that's where he got his flute idea, I'm sure. Now that was before recording with Sabbath, but Tony Iommi is not a good flute player. Let's just throw that out there. But I think that works to his advantage because what you get is very sparse. It's not note dense. He's not trying to be, a soloist with his flute. He's providing some extra spice, right? A little extra texture. And I think that really adds to the song. If he were a better flute player, it may have taken away from it.
Yeah, it might have got a bit too intricate.
Now, talk about intricate, though. This song, for me, Looking for Today, is my vote for Bill Ward's best moment in Sabbath history. He kills it on this song. He is just all over it.
I would agree. It's quite unusual. It's a bit uplifting, this song. It's the key of B major, and most of the doom stuff's in minor. This is in major, but although the music's uplifting, the lyrics are still cynical, dry, not exactly uplifting. It's talking about technology taking over, not keeping up, mankind not keeping up with it, being out of step, out of sync. So it's still got that Sabbath bite. And that's the good thing about this album. All the lyrics all the way through, they've got bite to them. And you can't call them cliched lyrics because I can't think of any other lyricist that was like Geezer Butler. It's really interesting, and I think we've mentioned this before, that he was so relieved when Dio took over the lyrical writing and thought, oh dear, thank goodness Ronnie took over it was like it was a chore or something, but I don't think he was sort of aware of how good he actually is as a lyric writer, and he kind of downplays it.
I have to guess, though, that, of course, you're introducing a completely different thing there. By the time you get to Sabotage, at the end of Sabotage, he's still very much at the top of his game. But then you have two albums that were just a terrible chore to put out. And probably by the end of those, he was sick of writing lyrics, especially as they weren't particularly well received.
I do agree that he did his lyric writing in Technical Ecstasy was a little bit below par, like Rock and Roll Doctor, which is a little bit cliched as an example. But getting back onto point, this is a proggy song to me, or prog elements. It's kind of uplifting, but it's the second last song. To me, I'm used to this song listing, and I think this is a perfect segue into the finale, which is kind of epic. Spiral Architect.
Right.
What do you think of this one?
So this is my other vote for favorite track on the album, and the other possible contestant for the best lyrics that Geezer ever wrote. Either this or National Acrobat. Who else, especially now they weren't calling it heavy metal very much in 1973. I mean, the press was calling it heavy metal, but that didn't have the same meaning that would take on after the new wave of British heavy metal later. Nobody in that hard rock space was writing lyrics like Spiral Architect. The DNA, are we born who we are, or do we become who we are through life? Are we programmed? Does the spiral architect, the DNA helix, does that program us? Does it determine what our life is? What a great philosophy. And I mean, it's 1973. DNA may have been well known in the medical field, but it was not like a household word in 1973. 15 is a word.
Yeah. I think this has got a little bit of bombast, and I like it a lot. Prog bombast, I wrote. I like how you've got all the different variety of elements. You've got the Tony Iommi Electrify, the power chords. You've got the acoustics, guitar, and then you've got the strings. And quite debatably, Bill Ward's finest drumming may be on this song as well.
Maybe. I mean, I'm still going to go looking for today, but I will say that when we talk about the extra elements, this is why I say you get such a different experience. For me, with Looking for Today as the last track, you actually end this album on this kind of uplifting song, right? So it's a very different experience than ending it with Spiral Architect. But Spiral Architect, and it's the strings I want to talk about, because that was a very common pop music element in 1973.
Tony Visconti, Bowie.
Yeah.
All of his production works all had strings.
But not just that. I'm talking like AM radio pop, like Glenn Campbell. Think about like Rhinestone Cowboy. It's those kind of strings. And the song actually ends with that. So if this is the last song on your album, on your CD in my case, you actually finish this album with what I think of as Burt Bacharach strings as the last thing on the album. That is so weird for Black Sabbath.
I think that my opinion is that I think it's got so much bombast, it puts it that level above Looking for Today. So Looking for Today, it's uplifting, but to finish the album, they've got to take it one notch higher. And I think it's deliberately and perfectly song listed as the final track. Finish with a little bit of bombast. Have all those prog elements. I think it perfectly sort of encapsulates all the elements that have been on the album, the previous 7 tracks, or how many.
I do say if you were going to pick a song to be the prog song from Black Sabbath, this would be the one. This is the song that sounds like, Yes and Genesis would not do this song, but it's the closest. If it was on a Yes or Genesis album, it also wouldn't be out of place.
Yeah. I love reading stories with rock musicians and their encounters with orchestras and orchestration, and how they kind of communicate to the orchestras what to play. And Ozzy apparently couldn't articulate on a musical level, like writing it down, or he hummed it. He hummed the melody and then said, and they interpreted what Ozzy was humming in respect of the vocal line, and they just made it from there. And to me, it's kind of perfect. I like it.
Yeah. I like it too. This is probably my second favorite track on the album.
Yep.
But it's a fantastic song. Again, I wish I owned a CD that had the proper track order, so that it's now burned into my head that Looking for Today is the if I've tried making a playlist that has them in the correct order, and it freaks me out because I'm too used to listening to it in the order that I have it. But it's a wonderful song. I said it's thoughtful, and it's bombastic, and it still has all of that great powerful guitar playing. It still has Geezer Butler's wonderful bass lines, and of course, again, Bill Ward is just for a guy who didn't write much music, he is really, one of the key elements of the Sabbath sound.
Absolutely. Well, I think this is the most fully realized symphonic interpretation of the Sabbath sound. So I think it's as perfect as it gets, and it's a fine closer to the album. Thank you, Reed. Thank you, as always. This is probably my second favorite Sabbath album. I've been on record that I think Sabotage is my favorite Black Sabbath album, but this would be closely followed behind. Where would this rank in your ranking of the Sabbath?
I don't think anything will ever displace Mob Rules as my favorite Sabbath album. But this puts up a fight against Born Again for being probably my second favorite.
Yeah, Born Again.
Really
that's top
dig Born Again.
Yeah, I dig Born Again too, and that's top 5. But I'd say this is be my number 2. We should do a Sabbath ranking show sometime. That'd be a lot of fun.
The whole catalog, including the Tony Martin years.
Yes, it would be epic.
I'm down for it.
All right, get out your pen and pad and start writing it down. That's something to look forward to, folks. Thank you, Reed. You can see Reed on the Contrarians, and please like and subscribe to this little channel, Rock Daydream Nation. I appreciate your comments. Click the bell. It puts up a reminder when there are new shows and new content coming on. Plenty of shows with me and Reed talking about other, rock bands and topics. Panel shows. We do a lot of panel shows. So thank you, Reed, once again, and cheers. Bye.
Cheers.